Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you how to get started in Substance Painter, several basic steps that you absolutely need to do right away before you even get making skins, because a lot of people I've noticed don't necessarily do these things or don't know what to do in the right order, and that can get you started on a bad foot, and there aren't any videos that discuss these very important things to do first so that your skin is the best it can be. So first of all, here I have this model. This is the Dark Lord, obviously. Get this file from running Vega, in this case going into E5M4 Boss, which is the library for the Dark Lord's mission, and finding the Dark Lord file. So how does that work? Well, in here, you'll open up Vega, because Samuel works for textures, but not for models. So you'll open Vega, you'll go into Base, Game, DLC2, E5M4 Boss. You'll open this, and make sure before you do that, in your settings, you change this so it's only load models. That'll make this a lot easier. And then you can just search Lord, and you'll see a bunch of these come up. When you're doing this, LWO files don't matter for you. These are like parts of the arena. They're just pieces of physical terrain. They're not important. Instead, what you want is Dark Lord mech base, and then darklordmech.md6 mesh. You'll export this. It'll come out as an FBX file, and that's what you'll use. So that's your first step. Once you're done with that, you will have a folder in exported files, which is a directory that Vega makes automatically, called models. In models, you'll go down. I just happen to have the models for almost everything extracted. There's no need for you to do this. I did it by accident. Then you have here Dark Lord mech. And then you have the file here. And then in images, you have automatically extracted every corresponding texture for the model and any parts of it right here in there. These are all the textures you'll use. So you'll take all these, just for the sake of organization, what I would recommend is you make a folder. In that folder, you have something like a project folder, and that's where I'll put my FBX file, and that's where I'll save my Substance Painter projects. What you're going to do is take a normal map. You're going to do this for every single part of the model. So you'll take it, you'll drag and drop it. Undefined, you'll change the texture, import your resources to, and it's always best to import your resources to your current project. That way they're not clogging up your library, and if you stop and you come back later, they'll be here. They won't disappear because you closed Substance Painter. And when you import a model, you have a choice of a resolution. If the one you pick there doesn't end up being correct, that's okay, because I'll show you how to do that. So you have Dark Lord mech arm. We see here that the dimensions are 1024 by 1024. So we want to go to texture set settings, and then up here at the top, we'll see that when I imported this, I selected 2048 by 2048 as the resolution. You'll change that to 1024. So now the resolution of this singular UDIM, the Dark Lord mech arm, is now 1024. That does not change any other part of the model. Down here under mesh maps, you have all these things that you don't have to care about except for select normal map. You will drag and drop the Dark Lord arm texture that we just imported. You'll drag and drop this onto select normal map, and now you have the normal map. And now I've put all of the normal maps assigned to all the different parts of this, and it's very good that I've chosen this model, because the next step of this is absolutely critical. Now you'll notice I'm going to toggle this on and off, Dark Lord mech torso wounds and torso, and you'll look at a lot of this, there's a lot of wounds, and that's going to be damage to the different parts of the body. It's part of the destructible demon system of Doom Eternal. But you'll notice as I activate this, you can see that these are distinct parts of the model, and they overlap each other. So that's why this next part is very important. You'll see this happen a lot in demon skins, because most of the demons have like gore effects, and you'll see this on guns. If you just take a gun model and load it in, all the different mods and the base part of the gun before any mods exist, they'll all overlap each other. And sometimes that's a problem depending on the gun skin. That's a different conversation altogether. The other thing I wanted to mention before we get to the next step is that when you have models, typically demons and enemies, not so much guns, but also the crucible. If you see it, you'll see there's these two parts right here, and you have Dark Lord Mech's sword, which is his crucible sword, and then the sword effect, which is this lovely plane that can be invisible. These are parts of the model that you will never modify in Substance Painter, because if I go into my textures here, we have Dark Lord Mech sword.png, Dark Lord Mech sword effect.png. You can tell these are just these images, and they have alpha, meaning transparency. There's no normal map. That means this is all being determined by, this is exactly like the Crucible, where there's just a lot of effect files declaring how the sword works, and there's nothing for you to actually edit. So now we're going to do the last thing. We've done all our checks. We've made sure every part of the model is the right resolution for the normal maps. And now we're going to do the big one. You're going to go to Edit, Bake Mesh Maps. And now here at the top, you will choose what size your mesh maps are. I would recommend that for the sake of accuracy, so that when you're looking at this, you will know exactly what these textures will look like in game. You choose the size of the UDIMs, the size of your normal maps. So in this case, almost all of them are 1024. Now over here, these are what mesh maps it will make from what is already available. You want to uncheck normal map because we've assigned our own normal maps. If you leave this checked, the game will try to create its own normal map from the model. Very few polygons. This will be a mess. You don't want this to happen. So uncheck normal, 1024 by 1024. Then lastly, you'll head on down to Ambient Occlusion. And this is where what I mentioned about the parts of the model overlapping each other comes into play. If you just don't change these settings and you bake your mesh maps anywhere where those two intersect or where one overlaps the other, you will end up with these really obvious, shitty ambient occlusionary black splotches that just cut off sharply, and they'll look hideous. So what you're going to do is, down here, ignore backface, meaning what's behind the parts of the model, they'll change always, and self-occlusion, which is to say that it's the self-occlusion of that part and whatever's around it. So you're going to change that to only same mesh name. So that when it generates ambient occlusion, it only does it, each part of the mech, each UDIM only makes that for itself. So now each part is not taking the other parts, the other UDIMs into account, and that's how you prevent them from overlapping and creating awkward, bad noise. Then we're going to go over to selection. As I said, we're not going to be modifying the shield. That's another particle effect. We're not going to be modifying the sword or the sword effect. And then you can just scroll through here, make sure everything else is one that you put in. It is. So the only other thing we need to change, the torso and the torso wounds are 2048 by 2048. We're going to uncheck those. And now everything we have left selected are 1024 by 1024 textures. And then lastly, I forgot and baked all the mesh maps, and I had to go undo that. You're not going to see it in the editing process, but that's okay. You're going to click Apply to All, because this setting right here, you see it says Texture Set Dark Lord Mech Leg. That means right now it's only making these settings for the leg. You want to do that for everything, so make sure always only say mesh name and then click Apply to All. And then finally, click on Common so you can make sure 1024, bake selected textures. So now you'll see when we come out of this and it's all finished, there's no weird blotchy sections. Everything is clean. You'll see that you have this nice shading, this extra detail that's in the cuts. It's really subtle. Notice how this segment is darker than this. That's the ambient occlusion. The game is going to use these here mesh maps that you just generated based off of the normal maps we imported to allow smart materials to map to them, and I will show you what that looks like momentarily. But one last thing, we need to go ahead and bake the mesh maps. Again, we want to unselect everything. It's all we have left to to do is the torso and the torso wounds. And we need to go back 2048 by 2048, bake selected textures. As you can see, this goes a bit slower. This doesn't go as fast. 4096, even slower than that. And so now your model is essentially ready to go. You are essentially ready to make mods. So now I'm going to show you, and this is very important. I'm going to come on down to the torso, because why not? This is the easiest. The reason this is critical is, let's say I have a regular material here, right? Let's just go with, it doesn't matter what this is. I'm just showing you. See how this is just kind of flat, right? You have this, so you have some detail here in the model, but that's all in the normal map. You might even be able to see it looks like there's a little bit of detail. That, like this is a little bit darker. That's all from the ambient occlusion, right? This is just the flat texture all across the entire thing. There's no detail, there's no nuance, nothing special. That's what every single material and smart material will look like if you don't bake your mesh maps. Instead, because I did bake my mesh maps, I'm going to go in here. I'm not going to choose one of the ones that I've made and put a lot of detail into. Instead, I'm just going to pick a default one. We will drag and drop it, and you will see the difference immediately. All of this silvery metal here is the scratches layer of this. So this metal layer, quote unquote, you'll know is just black. And it's only this rust effect. This rust effect is using the normal map to kind of splash itself all over. That is in the metal. This is a special material. We're not going to discuss that for now. Scratches is incredibly important because this smart map in the scratches is what causes this silver part of the metal to map everywhere except grooves. It uses the curvature, ambient occlusion, id, world space normal. It uses all of these to calculate where things should be going based on its AI and its algorithm. And so you get this increased detail. This is just a default, unmodified, vanilla smart material. And this is the dramatic increase in quality you get from baking your mesh maps. Such as this that I made here. And you'll notice if you look at this, you can see there's still darkness down in those scratches, but it's a lot more subtle. You may not necessarily want there to be this hyper aggressive, immediately visible darkness. But then down in here, there's a lot more detail. On the edges, you have these scratches and damages. And I have several layers of this to utilize. You have damage across here. You have more subtle parts that are dark. These are all things you can work around with and figure out by utilizing smart mask, mixing and matching them with your smart materials. You come up with things like this, where this is some very detailed edge damage. This is being calculated and developed by Substance Painter algorithms and AI based on your baked mesh maps. That's what this is coming from. But from there on out, I would recommend experimenting with everything you're doing, but getting started making skins in Substance Painter on your models, no matter what. These are always the first things you should do to make sure you can get the best product. Smart materials are always the best way to go, and this is how you get there. So thanks for watching, and I hope you are able to utilize this to make the best skins you can. Good luck, and we'll see you in the Discord.